Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Bradbury Group, New Zealand's best weekly political argument, hosted by the militant, Marxist, anti-Santa, Martyn Bradbury. The Bradbury Group is streamed live on Rover, Sky TV, YouTube and Facebook. Proudly sponsored by Watea, journalism you can trust. Let the arguments begin.
Kia ora Aotearoa. The true demarcation of power in a late-stage capitalism, liberal, progressive democracy is the 1% richest plus their 9% enablers versus the 90% rest of us. And once you see politics through that lens, the left can never lose another election ever again. Welcome to the Bradbury Group, New Zealand's best weekly political argument. I'm your host, the editor of the daily blog, Martyn Bradbury. Bomber to my comrades. Mr. Bradbury, if you're nasty. My pronouns are us and we. Coming up on this evening's end-of-year economy special, the political panel all-stars tonight are business desk journalist Maria Slade, economist Cameron Bagrie, and political commentator Matthew Tukaki. Tonight's one-on-one in 10 is co-leader of the Greens, Marama Davidson, on the green vision for the economy and the last TVNZ poll for 2025. Shout out to Kiwi, Skirt and Chewy from BHN moderating tonight's YouTube page. Good evening to all the Bradbury Easters online watching right now. Your comments will appear on screen as well. Shout out to our Watea, Facebook, Rover, Spotify, Apple Podcast and Sky TV whānau. And our Twitter panel this evening is Tim Selwyn. He'll be tweeting live online at Twitter, hashtag the Bradbury Group. Before all that, however, is this week's War on News. Brothers and sisters, shocking news this week that the Prime Minister has a Spotify listening age of 27. I'm honestly not sure what is more cringeworthy, that our Prime Minister has the music listening age of your average Taylor Swift fan, or that he's boasting about having the music listening age of your average Taylor Swift fan. The PM's favourite artists are Post Malone, Ed Sheeran, Chris Stapleton, Oasis, and Zach Bryan. Our Prime Minister has all the musical taste of a basic bitch charm bracelet from Pandora's in Botany, which as a metaphor manages to sum up his entire Prime Ministership. You are the Prime Minister, not a DJ on the edge. Talking of meaningless metaphors going nowhere, the political right in New Zealand now want to steal your Kiwi summer. ZB hosts, the Prime Minister, and even Auckland Chamber of Commerce Pope Simon Bridges have all weighed in this week, bemoaning that all the worker drones aren't working during the summer holidays. Simon Bridges cried out, "Are we still in holiday mode until March?" Which, coming from a man with a beard as wild as a Scotsman's untrimmed pubic hair bikini line, seems slightly amiss. His beard has taken on a holiday mode that would make your average castaway look clean-shaven. Not content with working you to death, selling your assets and privatising your public services, the political right now want to steal the quintessential Kiwi summer because, hi-ho, it's off to wage slavery we go. There's such an inspiring anthem for a nation with 5.3% unemployment rate. Remember, you are not a human being. You live to work until your boss gives you permission to die, which is actually ACT Party policy. And finally, in this week's War on News, the Housing Minister, Chris Bishop, told the Select Committee that all renters had to do to get lower rents was to simply renegotiate with their landlord because propertied boomer landlords and their corporate property manager scumbags love nothing more than reducing your rent. It's remarkable advice coming from Chris Bishop, who rents his home from his in-laws. So if you can't bargain with your mummy or daddy-in-law for a lower rent, go for it. Everyone else who isn't renting from mummy and daddy, however, is screwed. With advice like that, is it really surprising his coup against Chris Luxon was such a flop? The political panel all-stars up shortly, whānau. But first, this week's one-on-one in 10 with co-leader of the Greens, Marama Davidson. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show, and thank you for being available to the Fourth Estate. Your democracy is grateful.
Kia ora, tēnā koe, kia ora koutou. Good to see you all.
Marama, welcome to our end-of-year economy special. We currently have 5.3% unemployment, 72,000 fleeing mostly to Australia because of the short-term thinking of the government's 2024 decision to shut down the previous government's infrastructure pipeline that has caused cascade job losses and a total abdication of responsibility on the climate change. Who is this government running the economy for? The people of Aotearoa or their donors?
Corporate wealthy. That's very clear. I think it was back in June, that we saw the rich list that came out, for example. It's a long past time to tax wealth. So, when we tax wealth, we can make sure that we can fund the services, the public services that communities deserve. We make sure that we can pay people, workers, what they deserve. We can properly fund our health system, our schools. This is common sense, but for decades and decades, we have all been tricked into thinking that the only way for everyone to get a good go in life is for the rich to trickle down the wealth. Never happens, ever. So that's why it's way past time for us to tax wealth properly instead of just taxing those who work.
I feel with this government, they want to actually turn gravity upside down. They want trickle up. They want the poor to pay for everybody else. How will allowing overseas multi-millionaires buy $5 million mansions, public asset sales, and ramming through fast-track powers under urgency grow the New Zealand economy? And who is that actually growing it for?
It won't, is the short answer. We have already seen that when we encourage for the rich to be able to squirrel away for the uber wealthy, does it come back down to end homelessness and end poverty? Does it make sure that our workers are being paid what they deserve? I've just come from firefighters, Martyn, out on the forecourt in Parliament tonight. I'm really proud that our Green MPs have been meeting at their fire stations all around the country for several years. But they are fighting to be paid what they deserve and to have fire trucks that work. In a country that has enough, we have enough. This is the point here. We have enough in this country to make sure that we are properly paying our firefighters, our nurses, our teachers. And so, these are just political choices. Clearly, this government, just tonight here in the House under urgency, we've got the fast track amendment legislation coming through. 95% of submitters were strongly opposed. Who was in support, Martyn? The applicants, the corporates. That's it. No one else. So you ask me, who are they benefiting? It's very clear. It's very clear they are benefiting corporates and not New Zealanders, not our communities, and certainly not the environment.
The blitzkrieg of hard right policy continues under a misuse of urgency with far less scrutiny, policy generating homelessness, extreme welfare sanctions and underfunded public health services. How have we lost in only 2 short years so much of the egalitarian values that underpinned our nation?
I feel like they're trying to do as much damage as they can in a short amount of time, this current government. They have used urgency without proper reason, without justification, to ram things through. I mean, I asked a question in the House today to the Prime Minister what he thought about the Parliamentary Environment Commissioner. Saying, hey, you're using urgency in a way that is uncalled for. I asked the Prime Minister what he thought about being called out. He said, I disagree. So it's very clear they are willing to push through legislation which has the support of corporations and not the support of the people. They are doing it blatantly and unapologetically. And my pivot is back to us, the people. We can actually change this. This doesn't have to be the New Zealand that everyone is forced to live with.
And that's my next question. The Green Party has a vastly more holistic view of the economy. What are your values and what are your how would they change the economy that we've got right now?
An economy works for everyone instead of just prioritizing and benefiting the wealthy and corporate few.
Yeah.
An economy that puts the well-being of people first above corporate greed. An economy that protects the economy, which is our environment. There is no economy without healthy water, clean air, healthy soil. There is no economy without those things. There is no economy without healthy people. So an economy that protects the well-being of our people, our communities, and our living systems and environment is an economy that will take us into the future, that will make sure everyone is cared for, we have enough. That's the sort of economy that the Greens will fight for forever.
I think that your ideas on the green economy and pushing for new green jobs is the most important economic policy out there right now. Why aren't we getting more focus on it from the mainstream media when we have actual climate change? We're seeing the reality of climate change right now. You have the solutions. Why isn't the media picking that up and go, well, here are some ways forward?
I think every single day we're wanting to get out there our solutions, our media releases on environment.
And they're great. They're great media releases.
And, maybe I understand, maybe I acknowledge that it doesn't always make as much news as someone saying something racist. I acknowledge that. Actually, I do want to acknowledge that a lot in our media world, a lot of our media platforms are not funded the way that they should be. And so we've also got this competition for quick and easy bites, right? I get that.
Yeah.
And so, that challenge is on us though, Martyn.
Yep.
We have work to do to get on the ground. We've got to try as hard as we can in, I guess, mainstream media, if you like. But we also have to get on the ground and spread our word, engage in communities. That's what we've been doing. That's what we are continuing to do. We can't just rely on media alone.
I need to talk to you about the McSkimmings fiasco. You've come out and you've made some really strong commentary on this. I'm not interested in the he said business that we've got between Mark Mitchell, Chrissy, Chippy and Costa at the moment, because I just think that is missing the point. I find it unbelievable that Timothy got into so much crap at the beginning of this year when she said, quite honestly, there are some parts of our community that don't trust the police, and everybody piled on. Well, those people are very bloody quiet now. The focus should be on the victim in the middle of this, and also the wider issue that there just isn't enough scrutiny over the New Zealand police. The IPCA don't have the funding, they don't have the powers. When are we going to start talking about who is going to keep control of the gatekeepers? Who's watching the police? Because it seems like they're very keen to just move on and not actually put in new robust structures to ensure that there is no corruption in the New Zealand police force.
And it's not just the police. As a prevention violence minister, I do want to acknowledge that actually it's not new. For far too long, for decades and decades, we have known that when complainants who have suffered sexual violence, assault, domestic violence have sought help from police and other agencies in health and courts, we know that often that can subject the complainants to further harm through being not believed, through being dismissed, even worse, for being blamed to have brought on the violence themselves. So this is not a new thing, Martyn. Tamitha has always been correct. Not everyone has had good experiences with police.
Yeah.
I want to acknowledge that we set in place a long-term plan to call Crown agencies to account, to ensure, for example, that we put training in throughout our organisations so that frontline workers, so that workers can identify violence properly, take it seriously, refer people to the help they deserve. That work has started. but it has got a long way to go. What we are actually looking at, Martyn, I would love if men in power could instead commit to ensuring that they support the work to keep agencies accountable, that this never happens again. That's what I would like to see them using their voices for, instead of just pushing blame off themselves to protect themselves. How about we honour the complainant in the centre of this? She was not taken seriously. She was not believed because people felt that there is a narrow understanding of what real victims should look and sound like. And so this is what we need to be calling for. We need to, men in power, instead of pushing blame off, stand up for change, that we will fix this, that they will help to actually call the patriarchy to account, who has allowed for these tropes to continue where, we can't take women seriously if they're shouting or yelling. Heaven forbid that they are in desperation and are trying to be heard,
Right.
and heaven forbid that they display some behavior that takes that into account. So let's commit to centering these victims and survivors of assault and violence, and commit to the work so that it never happens again.
Here's what I don't understand of the skimming situation. Even if, let's for 30 seconds, let's just walk down this path where it's a failed affair, things have gone sour. Let's just walk down this path with Costa and his colleagues for 30 seconds. He still was looking at bestiality and child porn on his work computer. I mean, even if you're going to go, well, we're not sure about the situation and we're going to give you the benefit of the doubt, that little dance, fine and dandy. But he was watching incredibly violent and illegal material on his work computer, and they wouldn't have found that out if they hadn't done the investigation. So I don't understand how everyone can dance on the head of a pin in the situation when he has been convicted of something quite serious.
And while I don't have all of the timing clear in terms of what was found out when and when were promotion moves suggested,
Yep.
but it goes to, Martyn, what this goes to is how we readily and immediately dismiss women immediately when we have to pull all sorts of things out before we dismiss men. You know what I'm saying here?
Yeah.
So we are ready as a society. People are ready to very quickly minimize women and dismiss women's complaints.
Yeah.
And yet, even when someone's character is proven to be shady and questionable, we're still willing to give benefit of the doubt. It's patriarchy, Martyn. It always has been, and we are all responsible for burning that down.
Preach. We have to talk about the last TVNZ poll for the year with a huge slump in Green vote. How much of that, because I was genuinely surprised, to be honest, how much of that is a lack of media oxygen, and how much of it is the new reality of so many young Kiwis fleeing the country for Australia? Demographically, the Greens pitch younger, with so many young people leaving. Is this now a unique problem for the Greens?
Wouldn't put too much on any one poll, Martyn.
Sure, no, totally. You're absolutely right.
But no, I hear what people are saying. I acknowledge that people are going, whoa, what's happened? I acknowledge that. And what I want to say here is we are consistent whether the polls go up for us or down for us.
Yep.
You, the people, the listeners, the voters, you are the polls. We are hearing around the country that people are feeling hammered and want to feel hope for a government that will prioritise public service and community needs over corporate greed.
Yes.
We are hearing how that is impacting on people right now. We are doing the mahi of putting up the solutions and getting on the ground and engaging, and absolutely doing our best to get out into the media. We're doing what we need to be doing. We've taken insights from community, from research, from what we're hearing on a day-to-day basis. We're marrying that with our values that we've always stood strong on and our own policy research. We've got that out there, and we know that we need to be trusted to deliver these things and speak about our record on working for people and planet. So we're doing that, Mahi Martyn. There's nothing I would change.
Yes.
Because what we hear keeps affirming our direction and where we want to go. And we will say that whether we are up in the polls or down in the polls.
Finally, Marama, your message to the whānau as we end 2025, please.
What I want for Christmas is broad, incredible public support, that the public feel inspired by the hope and the solutions of what a strong green government could do, ensuring that we bring down the cost of living, that we protect the environment that you all cherish, that we uphold te tiriti for a unified Aotearoa.
Preach.
Big mihi to the over 2,000 schools and ECU centres who are giving the government the big middle finger against their anti-tiriti legislation. I wish that we inspire you all, that you can rest in Christmas and over summer however you can, and that we continue to inspire you all to feel the hope that you can change this government, not just kick it out, but put in place one that has your best interests at heart.
Thank you, comrade. We will see you next year. Thank you so much, Marama.
Kia ora, ka
Kia ora.
kite.
Be well. Okay, now to our political panel all-stars. Our first panellist is quite frankly too good for this show. One of the best and most respected business journalists in New Zealand. Property editor at BusinessDesk, Maria Slade. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show. One word to describe the week, please, ma'am.
Podcast. And I know I'm on one.
Yes.
But I have been working on a podcast which has consumed my life for the last couple of months. Just came out on December the 1st.
Awesome.
It's called the Fall of the House of Du Val. And it's about the collapse, the $268 million collapse of the Du Val property group that is now in statutory management.
Right.
Which, as listeners will know, is a very rare situation. So, yeah, that's been completely overtaken my life at the moment. Yeah, I've learned a lot.
Welcome to the podcast world.
Podcasts, as it turns out, are quite hard.
I know, it's quite good, isn't it? Our next panellist is also too good for this bloody show. One of the most respected economists in New Zealand, live on Zoom, the always insightful Cameron Bagrie. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show. One word to describe the week, please, sir. Okay, he's dropped out of the Zoom, but we're getting him back. And last but certainly not least, he's perfect for this show. Chef kiss, mwah, political commentator, broadcaster, and raconteur. He's the Māori for all seasons. Talkback host of the mighty Wātea Network, the working class anvil that is Matthew Tukaki. Kia ora, comrade. Welcome to the show.
Good to be with you, Boni. Well, a Māori cast. I mean, podcast I feel is a very Europeanised way of describing talking into a microphone. But we've just finished production of a new podcast called Off the Sheep's Back, all about the Māori economy. And it took about maybe 3 weeks of intensive research and interviews. But the first broadcast has happened and pretty happy with the result.
Fantastic. We've got Cameron Bagrie back online. Kia ora, Cameron.
Evening.
How are you? One word to describe the week, please, sir.
Weekly what?
One word to describe the week. Just the week.
Oh, the week, yeah. Mixed.
Mixed. Brothers and sisters, let's get into tonight's end of year economy special, where we ask green shoots of recovery or dried snot of desperation. Issue 1, ramifications of the last TVNZ poll for the year. What happens now? Issue 2, did survive until 25 mutate into we're all dicks in 26? Who did the economy actually work for this year? And issue 3 tonight, predictions for the election and the economy for next year. Plus we'll have a final word at the end of the show where each panellist gets to go to the mountaintop to see who breaches broadcasting standards this week. My money's on Tukaki. Comrades, let's get into tonight's end of year special with issue 1, and that is the last TVNZ poll for 2025 that saw National on 36, Labour on 35, ACT on 10, New Zealand First on 9, Greens on 7, Māori Party on 1. Matthew, this poll is a total body blow for the left and is far worse than it looks because we are giving Te Pāti Māori 6 votes for the electorates they currently hold, which no one believes they will hold after their meltdown. Have the Greens and Te Pāti Māori left the left down?
Is it really a bad poll? I mean, look, we're less than 12 months away from the election. I get that. But a poll is a poll. And I hate to sound like a politician, but there's a lot of time left in 2026 to recover their positions. Whether Te Pāti Māori can, I'm not too sure. We'll wait and see. I mean, let's face it, John Tamahiri is one of the great Lazaruses of our age, so all bets are on him, and pulling that party back up. And the Greens, disappointing result, I think, for them. But it does also show other things that are going on. The tussle between ACT and New Zealand First is really interesting to watch. National's taken a breather from that tussle by remaining fairly stable in the numbers. But watch the space as they begin to turn on each other. I mean, look, people forget Winston Peters is the perennial campaigner. He will do everything he can to stay back in or get back into power. He's learnt the lesson of being out of government for that period that he was. Shane Jones has as well. And there's nothing to say that they might themselves not end up in a left-leaning or left-of-centre government or coalition. They've been there before and they can be there again.
Follow-up question. With National up, has Luxon done enough to keep his leadership safe?
No, I don't think he has. Okay. I think Chris Bishop, what's really clear, and I've said this to you before on this show, that I do not believe Chris Bishop is going to be the likely contender. That's been proven by the fact that he allegedly attempted a coup and it failed. You only go into these sorts of skullduggery little exercises if you know you got the numbers.
Right.
Lesson of Australian Politics 101, of which I'm very well in tune with. I don't think he is the right candidate, and now those backbenchers are getting even more nervous. I was watching the comments of the member for New Lynn. I forget his name, Paulo Garcia, I think his name is. And he looked decidedly nervous talking to Mikey Sherman on the news earlier. And that tells me that backbenchers are getting nervous. They're swirling around themselves trying to figure out, who do I back to survive? Because I'm on the unemployment line in less than 12 months if I don't find somebody to back to bring me home.
Maria, ACT are on a powerful 10%. Here, and the Taxpayers Union are about to launch an attack on Nicholas Willis for overspending in a campaign that will only benefit ACT. David Seymour is the real winner in this poll, isn't he?
Yes, I mean, they've done very well. They didn't beat the Greens overall at the election, so this is a turnaround.
Right.
And this is quite surprising figures for the Greens.
Yeah.
Although if you start to think it through, I do kind of wonder if they've suffered from a little bit of the Te Pāti Māori contagion. There would be people around the fringes of the left who may go, oh my God, the Maori Party is imploding. What is this going to mean for the left's chances at the next election? Should we perhaps shuffle our vote over to Labour? I mean, Labour's obviously picked up a bit there. Have the Greens suffered from that? I mean, again, it's one poll. You can't read too much into it. But you would start to ask those sorts of questions, I would think. I don't think it's as simple as young people moving to Australia. It is quite surprising that the Greens have lost this time round.
Follow-up question. ACT at 10% and National at 36% is within a whisker of not needing Winston. Is the Taxpayers Union smear attack on Nicola Willis ill-advised or worth a shot for ACT to cannibalise National vote?
Oh, gosh, ill-advised. I don't know. I mean, I think I'll go back to what Matthew said about New Zealand First. I was thinking about that just earlier today. There is nothing to stop them swinging to the Labour Party if they want. If it's in their interest to form a government over a certain set of issues, they're a populist party.
Right.
So, they could go that way. So maybe it is a bit ill-advised of ACT to be biting the hand that feeds at this point.
Cameron, risk analysts at BMI said yesterday that the government's coalition is, quote, under severe strain and that our political environment had become increasingly volatile. They say the clash over regulatory reform, persistent treaty debates and deteriorating public confidence signal a turbulent road ahead. Does the economy suffer when politics become this polarised?
There was a great quote by the Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund end of last year. And what she made reference to was, look, global growth is still pretty good, but global growth is not as strong as what it was 10 to 20 years ago.
Right.
And what she referred to was this concept called dissatisfied populations. Right? And part of the reason we've got dissatisfied populations is that we might be getting growth, unemployment's not that high, but it's bloody hard to put food on the table for your family.
Right.
So what we're seeing globally at the moment, and New Zealand's caught up in this as well, is that you've seen moves away from the political centre, the political periphery.
Yes.
Far left and the far right.
Yep.
Yeah, so if you look at the 2023 election result in New Zealand, Labour and National got 65% of the vote, the periphery got 35%.
Yes.
Yeah. What I'm detecting in the polls, which is what you're talking about before, was that I think we're starting to see a little bit of a shift back towards the political centre.
Okay.
Because people are actually thinking, you know, I don't like the far left, I don't like the far right. We're seeing this political ping pong. When we get this political ping pong, nothing gets done.
Yeah.
And we go from one extreme to the other. And I think there's a centralisation that started to go on within where the voters starting to think about.
Right. Follow-up question. Ratings agency S&P warned this week that the government's proposed rates cap risks squeezing council budgets and negatively impacting credit ratings. Are we seeing populist policy disregarding economic realities?
Well, I've got to be careful here in regard to what I say because, you know, if you'd have done your due diligence, you would have noticed that I was on the committee that actually advised the government in regard to what to do in regard to rate capping.
Yes.
Now, the original proposal in regard to rate capping was a hard number. Now, a hard number follows the New South Wales experience where this is where you need to be. That's it. If you want to be outside that number, you need to apply for regulatory relief from a regulator.
Yes.
Now, pretty quickly we came to the view that that sort of model's nuts. You need a little bit more flexibility. So we've come up with a model which is a band. That's a flexible model. Common sense sort of suggests you need to be around 2 to 4%. That would allow council income growth to be around 5%, which is in line with nominal GDP, which I think is a common sense sort of approach. So, so there's a bit of discipline that's being brought in here. But
yes.
Look, yeah, let's be honest. There's politics at play here as well. You know, if I look at, I live in Wellington. My rates in Wellington are up 92% in 5 years. Thanks very much, Wellington City Council. Yeah, that's just, and they're proposing a 12% number next year.
Yeah,
that is unsustainable, right? So there's going to be blowback. We now need to see councils eat their own lunch, recycle assets, reprioritise expenditure. You can't just expect you're going to turn to the ratepayer and just flip the ticket.
You don't think possibly new revenue sources like government paying rates on land that they have or rebates on GST, wouldn't that be a better way for be able to give councils those revenue streams to be able to rebuild their infrastructure?
Well, councils are going to need an alternative model, and it doesn't matter if you look at bed taxes, whether you look at more user pays, which is going to come through the system. But what we need is a fundamentally different model because the current model is broken.
Right.
And part of the solution is going to be, yes, there's going to be some reallocation in regard to CapEx versus OpEx. Councils are going to need to consolidate. We're having those conversations as we speak around Wellington. We've done it in Auckland.
Yep.
We start to do it around the rest of New Zealand. What's going on across regional authorities, recycling of assets. Everything's on the table because you cannot tell me that something's sustainable is that income growth goes at 3 to 4% and you expect you're going to clip ratepayers by 9 to 10%.
Sure.
Doesn't work.
Quick round to all of you. Ruth Richardson has said she wants to debate Nicola Willis for this taxpayers union stunt. Is it difficult in a fight between Ruth Richardson and Nicola Willis to work out who to cheer for? Matthew, you both want them to go down, don't you?
Yeah, look, I'm happy to host the debate. To be frank, I mean, I wouldn't put either of them in bikinis and put them in a mud wrestling ring. There you go. I breached the broadcasting
already.
standards
Bang,
authority.
straight away. Maria, is this a stunt?
Oh, you could sell tickets to this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Take bets.
Yeah.
Oh, it'd be very entertaining.
Cameron, are you going to be watching?
Oh, I reckon I'd be a bloody good mediator.
The referee, the boxing ring. Here we go.
Comrades, we need to move on to...
I could call them both to account.
We need to move on to issue 2 tonight, and that is the economy at the end of 2025. Are we seeing green shoots of recovery or the dried snot of desperation? Maria, did survive until 25 mutate into we're all dicks in 26? Who did the economy actually work for this year?
I think it didn't really work for the average person because, as has been said this evening already, it's still blimmin' expensive at the supermarket. You know, electricity is still very expensive.
And if we're feeling it, Jesus, people who are just holding on are feeling it, right?
Exactly. So, yes, obviously the economy is now starting to pick up. All the indicators are pointing to that. Cameron can tell you much more about that than I can. But I think one of the things is that we still have going back to the winners, some people who did win were first home buyers and renters too, much as you may disagree with me. Rents have actually come back. And we now have a surplus of rental properties on the market. So
all we had to do was drive 72,000 offshore. Wow, why didn't we do that earlier?
It wasn't just that, though. It's obviously the state of the property market. A lot of homeowners are not selling. They're hanging on or whatever they're doing. So they've put their properties on the rental market in the meantime. So that has affected rents. And so rents have dropped quite considerably in places like Wellington and Auckland. The housing market is not going to take off anywhere near like it has done in recent years in the next few years. No.
Really?
Again, Cameron will tell you this, I'm sure. All the commentators are saying that we had a housing boom on top of a housing boom with what happened during the COVID years.
Right.
We've come plummeting down the other side of it. And in the next few years, we are not going to see anything like the growth that we saw in the past few years. And that is because interest rates went as low as they could possibly go. In fact, we had Sharon Zollner from ANZ on our podcast the other day explaining this. The next 30 years are not going to look anything like the last 30 because people can't borrow any more money.
Right.
They've already borrowed as much as they can.
Right.
And they did so when interest rates were so low. And now we're not going to see that environment going forward. And so everyone's picking, Forsyth Bar put out a paper the other day, they're picking that housing growth will be around income growth, which is about 3.5% a year, roughly speaking. So yeah, there's a win, I guess, if you like. But the bad side to it all is we still have big structural problems in our economy. We have very poor productivity. We've got slow population growth. There's only so many cows you can milk and tourists you can bring in to keep your economy going.
Follow-up question. You are a business journalist. Are they really green shoots of recovery? What are you seeing out there at the front line?
Oh, it's a little bit, I guess, is the thing. You start looking... In the business community, they start looking for indicators like I saw today. The concrete numbers are going up because we've talked about this on this podcast before. You know, that's a harbinger because you put the concrete down before you build the rest of the house. Tractor sales are up a bit. Consumer confidence is ticking up slightly. So yes, it's starting to head in the right direction, but it isn't like it's taken off.
Cameron, the cheerleaders for free market capitalism are all celebrating the green shoots of recovery here. Liam Dan at the New Zealand Herald is already popping the champagne corks. Do you think business journalists have to be optimistic to unleash the animal spirits and get criticised if they're too negative?
Well, no. Right. If I was going to, throw a bit of a barb at business journalism across New Zealand, it'd be the quality of it compared to what we had 20 to 30 years ago.
Okay.
I think there's too much social journalism today and there's not enough business journalism.
Yeah.
Focusing on what's actually going on.
What do you define as social journalism, Cam?
Are we seeing an economic recovery out there? The answer is yes. But let's have a look at the reality, right? GDP per capita, which is population adjusted growth, is down 3.5% in the past few years. Right? So we're going to see, I think, the third quarter GDP, which is a yesterday number, is going to be a pretty good GDP number, up around 1%. So GDP per capita probably up 0.5, 0.6. So minus 3.5 starting position, plus 0.5, you're still in a hole of minus 3 percentage points. So yes, the economy has turned the corner without a doubt across the economic indicators, but you're climbing out of an economic hole. So it'll take another sort of 12 to 18 months before people start to, I think, feel a little bit better about what's going on, because we've taken a big economic hit over the past 2 years. Yeah, we were in fairyland in 2021, 2022, smoked up on low interest rates and $65 billion worth of government expenditure. We're in party land.
Yeah.
It was off the charts. It was so non-normal. Now, guess what? We're coming back down to a little bit of normality. And that's a big economic adjustment that people need to understand. But it's not just about economics. There are social aspects to this. And people, you said at the start, unemployment rate 5.3. 5.3 historically is still low. Now, that's not to disrespect the fact that 5.3% is still too many people unemployed. Yeah, but during the GFC, the Asian crisis, the unemployment rate was in excess of 6%.
Follow-up question. The RBNZ says the job finding rate is the worst in 30 years. Reserve Bank forecasts show the country on track for the second worst growth performance.
Well, let's have a look at the stats, right? Bank non-performing loans, 0.7% of total loans.
Yep.
About half what they were during the global financial crisis.
Yep.
If I have a look at financial stress in regard to the credit card utilisation out of credit cards, are they high? No. 90 days in arrears high? The answer is no. Now, so a whole lot of the economic indicators, if I look at building consents per 1,000 residents, average of what we've seen for the past 40 to 50 years, down on what they were 2 years ago, but no worse than average.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of normalisation on it, but what there is going on across New Zealand, and this is where it worries me, because you've got an overlap here between economic and social variables. So the economy at face value is taking a huge pummeling. Is it as bad as the GFC? No way. But what we're seeing out there, this is a different sort of downturn. This is a different sort of economic struggle. Why? Because the ruthless variable out there at the moment that is pummeling people is inflation.
Right.
And we really haven't seen that for 20 to 30 years.
Right.
And the average family out there just wants to put food on the table for their family.
Yeah.
And that's why the National Party talks about the economy being the biggest issue. What do we see through the Ipsos Issues Monitor? It's food, cost of living, inflation.
Yeah. Matthew, we are told the green shoots of recovery here, but for many whānau, looking around their Christmas table this year, they'll see many missing who have fled to Australia. They will see the homelessness lining the streets. They will see public services at breaking point. And they will see 600,000 Kiwis needing food banks every single month. Who is the economy serving?
Yeah, look, I mean, I kind of agree with Cameron on this, although maybe I'll go further. I think we really do get caught up in the emotion of what we see on our TV screens, and that's all very valid. Absolutely. I mean, we have an issue with whānau unable to put food on the table, no doubt about that. But this is also symptomatic of the fact that we do not take long-term views on how we need to structurally reform the economy. And one of the examples I've given recently is if only we had retained in 1972 what Norm Kirk was proposing in regard to superannuation, we would have probably had about $500 billion in superannuation funds to invest to this day. We didn't do that. The Australians went and did it. Paul Keating went and did it. So we take a very short-term view of how we structurally reform big issues because we're very much into short-termism. So that's the first thing I'd say. The second thing I'd say is there are green shoots in the economy, but it's a Māori economy. I mean, for the last couple of years, iwi, hapu Māori business and entrepreneurs have been diversifying their asset base. And to what you said about the cows, there's only so many cows you can milk. There's only so many cows you can throw into the slaughterhouse and export to China.
Right.
So, with Ngāi Tahu's play into sharesies and technology plays and the gaming sector, and I don't mean gaming as an online gambling, but all of these different things, the Māori economy has diversified to a point where it's now worth in excess of $120 billion. The other green shoot in the Māori economy, pardon me, is the fact that our Māori population is getting younger. They're going to have at a point more disposable income than those New Zealanders who are non-Māori who are retiring out, because that end of the population is beginning to age. And these are the sorts of big conversations we need to have. To be frank, I give two shits whether Nicola Willis and Ruth Richardson turn up and do some sort of debate somewhere. What I care about is whether or not we have enough. I mean, Cameron was talking about recycling of assets. I'd rather see recycling of assets into a poolable fund where we can utilise those assets and gain more equity to further invest in our own infrastructure out of. They're the things that I think make sense to New Zealanders. So we're not selling the family farm, so to speak, but we're building the asset base where we can do more with it. So these are the conversations I think we need to have. Now, in regard to our whānau who are doing it tough, I think there is more work to be done on underemployment in this country, the casualisation of the workforce. And so where people used to have a full-time job, some of them are working 2 to 3 jobs. Yep. And I get that rent is coming down, but where I live, I also see people sleeping in their cars in car parks or down at the local boat ramp or wherever it might be. These are not unemployed New Zealanders. These are the working poor. Yeah. And they often slip under the radar because they don't reach enough of a threshold to be able to gain some sort of support. So again, I say to people, while Nicola Willis and Ruth Richardson might want to have their little Eastbourne soirees and battles at the end of the wharf, that means absolutely nothing to the future of the New Zealand economy.
Quick round to you all. The RME changes announced today. Will they work, Maria?
Well, they haven't announced all the detail. They haven't announced all these bodies that are going to underpin these pieces of legislation. So how would we know?
Yeah. Cameron?
It's a step in the right direction. The RMA was broken.
Yes.
But, as was said, let's await the details in regard to how this sort of thing is going to work.
Matthew.
Cameron makes another good point. And I might be agreeing with them all night long, but the devil is in the detail. The RMA has been a mess for a very long time.
Totally.
Good on somebody that wants to have a crack at sorting it out. I do think they're in the never, though, when they start talking about billions of dollars saved per annum. Yes, in 30, 40 or 50 years, but I think they need to stop hoodwinking the New Zealand public as if it's all going to be magicked up tomorrow. That's in the never. So I think the devil is in the detail. Like a lot of the announcements that have been coming out recently, we get very little detail to cost things adequately, properly and independently.
Comrades, we need to move on to issue 3 tonight, and that is the predictions for the economy and the election next year. Cameron, what are your predictions for the economy 2026 and the election next year?
Well, the economy is very clearly picking up. Right? Are we going to be knocking the ball out of the park? The answer is no. But, growth is going to be on a firmer trajectory. At face value, if you look at historically, that favours the incumbents.
What do you think of?
There's two sticking points to that.
Yep.
Look, number one, it worries me what the head of the International Monetary Fund has sort of said in regard to these dissatisfied populations.
Yes.
Having growth is not enough.
Yes.
Right? Because if you've got growth and you've got inflation at 3%, I think the government's going to have problems, particularly if the RBNZ could be hiking interest rates in 2026, which is what the market is now starting to think about.
Right.
So, yes, glass half full, growth. Traditionally, that's going to favour the incumbents over the challengers. But I think cost of living, inflation, interest rates are going to be a big sticking point in 2026, along with, I think the average New Zealand voter is moderating towards the centre,
yes,
as opposed to the left or the right.
Yes. What are your thoughts, if I can get them, Cameron, on the AI bubble speculation? Do you think that's a legitimate threat?
Does it have the characteristics of a bubble? The answer is yes. But if you go back to have a look at what we saw in 2000, where we had a bit of a bubble and then it popped and we cleaned out a whole lot of crap, and there are a whole lot of good firms that are still around that came out of that era because they were fundamentally back in the right sort of thing in regard to technology. So there's going to be winners and there's going to be losers out of this. The problem is not everybody's going to be a winner.
Yeah. But
when you follow the market, you sort of want to jump on the bandwagon because you're not sure who's going to be the losers.
Yeah.
So you follow the trend. So watch this space. there's a lot of good stuff about AI, but everybody's not a winner.
Yeah. Matthew, economy next year, the election. Thoughts?
Look, I think the election is all going to be about the economy stupid. I really do. And I do think, honestly, that New Zealanders are moving back into the centre. And I think it was John Key that lamented, didn't he, that, elections are won in the centre. And I think that's where people need to be. That's the first thing. The second thing is that I do believe that the economy is still in trouble. For a range of different reasons, including the fact that we haven't yet seen what an increase in interest rates might do. I do think a lot of New Zealanders are overextended in their personal finances, and all we have to do is have a look at credit card debt and the tradition of people robbing Peter to pay Paul. So, getting one credit card to pay off the other credit card that pays off the other credit card that pays the power bill. So I think there's a lot of that happening in middle New Zealand, and we haven't yet seen that wash through.
Sorry, that's not coming through the credit card statistics.
You're not seeing that, Cameron? You're not seeing that?
It's not coming through the credit card statistics. Okay. If I look at 90-day arrears on credit cards, they're still pretty low. If I look at your credit card utilisation, i.e. what your credit card balances are as a share of your total balances, it's not high.
Yeah, that's not what I was saying. Hang on, that's not what I was saying. What I was saying is we could see more of that occur in 2026. I wasn't lamenting that was happening right now, but it could happen into 2026. And the final thing I'd say is that it is about jobs as well and employment, but not so much the job as it is wage growth. And cost of living is still increasing, and so my biggest fear, particularly along the lines of low-wage individuals, is whether or not they're going to experience enough wage growth to keep up with the cost of living in 2026.
Maria, economy next year, election next year. Predictions.
One of the things I'm going to be watching quite with great interest is how Auckland reacts, because Auckland gave Labour an absolute walloping post-COVID because Auckland suffered so badly after, under all the very strict lockdowns and so forth.
6.5% unemployment in Auckland.
Yeah, so it's going to be really interesting to see how Auckland responds to that. I think it's also going to be interesting to see how Aucklanders respond to the current round of submissions that are going on at the moment on Plan Change 120, such a sexy name. But this is the plan change that is being enforced upon Auckland by Chris Bishop and his government. In my view, it is not a planning document. It is a political document. It is the national government attempting to look as if they're doing something about housing when Auckland's unitary plan was already doing a fair bit of the work for them. The council's between a rock and a hard place because they have to accept this plan for reasons as downzoning the flooded areas that occurred during the anniversary floods. So I think I will be interested to see how much anti-national government sentiment there is in Auckland this time around, whether things will turn around for all these sorts of reasons and support flow back towards Labour or the centre left perhaps.
Quick round to all of you. Where will unemployment be next year? Where will inflation be next year? And which political party will have the largest percentage support? Cameron?
Inflation, well, it depends which part of 2026. You want to say the forward part or the back part?
Give me the middle.
First, around the middle, 2.5 to 3%.
Wow.
So it's still in that uncomfortable zone.
Wow.
Right? And if it's at 2.5 to 3%,
I
think the Reserve Bank is going to be thinking about
raising interest rates, right?
Sorry?
They'll think about raising interest rates, right?
Yeah, and it'll become political the back half of this year. So if you look at market pricing at the moment,
yes,
the market is saying we could see an interest rate hike in the second half of 2026.
Wow.
So
just in time for the election.
Well, yeah, well, that makes things interesting, right? If you look at fixed lending rates, I think it was Westpac lifted fixed lending rates 20 to 30 basis points today.
Wow.
Right? So what that is basically saying is that it looks like we've seen the low in the interest rate cycle.
Right.
And, interest rates are low, but the problem is a whole lot of people have been used to interest rates with a 3 or a 2% handle in front of them.
Sure.
Yeah, all of a sudden, that's a completely different dynamic now when you start to think about, well, the low's probably been 4.5.
Yeah.
Maybe normal is 5.5.
Wow. Unemployment rate, where do you see it?
I think the unemployment rate mid next year will be around 5.
Okay, so not much different from where we are now.
No, yeah, I think there's a whole lot of structural issues in the labour market. I think firms in the initial stage of the economic expansion are going to be pretty cautious about hiring staff.
Yep.
You see hours worked move up quite rapidly. Why? Because you don't want to bring someone on board if you're not quite sure whether this expansion is going to be durable.
Right.
So what we see is that, a key lead variable is what calls productivity growth. In the early stage of economic expansion, you just work people a little bit harder. You get a little bit more out of them. You get productivity growth. And that'll be the first leg deposit on this economic expansion. Bigger issue, Bomber, though, is not where we're going to be in the next 12 months.
Yep.
It's where we're going to be in the next 5 years.
Right.
Right. And that's where, energy prices, gas, electricity, rates, you don't get wealthy selling more expensive houses to each other.
Preach. Matthew, where are we going to be inflation-wise, unemployment-wise next year?
I'm with Cameron between 2.5% to 3%, probably the top end of that prediction.
Yep.
I think we're already at nearing the top of the band. Unemployment between 5.2% and 5.4%. Māori unemployment obviously is going to be a lot higher.
Yes.
Than that. I still think the underemployment data needs to be meted out. But a prediction.
Yep.
I still think that we're yet to see the problem with insolvency amongst small business.
Sure.
Particularly as all these debts and loans or COVID payments come due to the IRD. And if I was the government or the revenue minister, I'd probably be giving directions to the IRD right about now not to be so heavy-handed with a lot of these businesses, because they're still doing it pretty tough. And just to close them and liquidate them because money's owed back to the taxpayer. Well, I mean, we can talk about student loans all bloody night too.
Maria?
I don't know enough about inflation to really say, so I'll go with what these guys are saying. It feels like unemployment has kind of reached its peak, hopefully, just from the sentiment you get out there in terms of business activity. Just going back to that point about the liquidations, though, yes, the IRD are the main instigator of liquidations at the moment, and that is because they have hung on for so long.
Yeah.
Businesses use the IRD basically like a bank. It allows them to during hard times, and now they've just run out of runway.
Yeah.
So I don't actually think it's fair to say the IRD should back off, because they've been pretty patient for a very long time with a lot of businesses. So and that's just an unfortunate consequence of the downturn that we've gone through, but hopefully we're starting to see the end of it.
Comrades, we need to wrap the show with a final word. Matthew, your final word this week, please, sir.
Costa. If you're accosted in the midst of an employment case, you better hope that you've got your receipts down pat. And Andy Costa did not have his receipts.
Maria.
Journalism. Again, just giving a quick plug for our podcast. We got support from the Brian Gaynor Business Journalism Initiative. So you'll remember Brian Gaynor, founder of Milk Asset Management, was a very, very big supporter of investigative journalism, and this is part of his legacy. So this podcast wouldn't have happened without the support of that fund. Cool. They have also supported my colleague Matt Nippert to do an incredible story about the Cook Islands flagging the shadow fleet. You guys may have seen that on the Hill.
Yeah, amazing
really
story.
Huge piece of journalism. So
Matt's pretty good.
there is some really great investigative journalism going on out there.
Cameron, your final word this week, please, sir.
One word called trust. If I think about the 2026 election, we can talk about the economy, we can talk about the cost of living, we can talk about various economic policies or social policies. It's going to come down to one word called trust. Who do you think's got the better credentials? And I note Barbara Ebbins' speech at the Labour Party conference over the weekend tried to disconnect with the Ardern-Robertson government and reconnect with the Clark and the Cullen government, because she talked about discipline. And that's about restoring a little bit of your economic credibility, that, yes, you can have a social conscience, but you have to have a responsible conscience.
Thank you, comrades. To my final word, brothers and sisters, Make no mistake, the last TVNZ poll of the year is a body blow to the political left. If we look through the fiction that Te Pāti Māori have 6 seats because they currently have them, the result is far worse than the poll suggests. I think the massive loss of Kiwis overseas is driven by a younger demographic, and that is going to cost us votes because younger people vote Green. I think the terrible internal fight inside Te Pāti Māori has been deeply damaging to the Māori Party brand, which has in turn eroded the impact of the overhang for the left. I think the general lack of hope and vision from the left make it difficult to counter the apathy and cynicism the culture war spite generates. The blitzkrieg of hard right legislation being rammed through Parliament while everybody is too busy to notice is an abuse of power and process, and that leads to an apathy from the disaffected. This abuse of power coincides with social media hate algorithms dominating the fourth estate and replaces it with echo chambers where the worst angels of our nature reign while creating an all-tribe, no-village cultural dimension. There is much for the left to chew over this summer. Labour have walked away from Mamdani's state-backed radicalism and are channeling Keir Starmer's incrementalism to catch the soft blue middle vote. The Greens must become politically relevant by focusing on motivating those who didn't vote and ensuring their under 40 base gets out to vote. Te Pāti Māori need to sort their shit out because the ambitions of a few have swamped all our walkers. This hard right government, with their anti-treaty, anti-Māori, anti-disabled, anti-renter, anti-worker and anti-environmental agenda that strangles the common good for their donors' interests, are laughing all the way to the ballot box. The left need to get their shit together, because if these arseholes win a second term, there won't be any point winning the Treasury benches because the mutilated remains of the state will be so damaged it can't actually function for the people. The right manipulate the petty bigotries of middle New Zealand better than the left can inspire for the common good. And with that cheery note, Merry Christmas to everyone. Join us next week for our final show of 2025 with Christmas guest appearances from across the political spectrum. Who's been naughty and who's been nice? We'll find out next week. In solidarity, the revolution continues. Ka pai Aotearoa.
Bradbury Group, New Zealand's best weekly political argument. The Bradbury Group is an independent podcast through the Rover Network, sponsored by Wātea News. After the show, the Bradbury Group enjoys conviviality at 165 Ponsonby Road. Why not pop down, meet the show staff and plot the revolution? That's 165 Ponsonby Road. Tuesday night drinking at its best. Everything on the show is an opinion and shouldn't be taken seriously enough to attempt defamation action against us. We were joking. We're never serious about anything. And officially, a small wetter in Avondale is legally the owner. Good luck finding him. Don't forget to follow, like and comment.